we're going to look at making a constraint layout. So we're going to have a main activity XML layout. So we're not using compose, and we're going to see how to work with a constraint layout, how to apply the constraints, what constraints are necessary, and so on. Android Studio Flamingo, and we are starting an activity, and we want an activity that has the view, that has the layout. So we start with empty views activity, that sort of middle one, rather than empty activity, which would be using compose, which does not have the XML layout. Choosing the views activity and then letting the Gradle sync, we expand the res folder and then expand within that the layout folder, and then find activity main and sort of select that, double click that, open up that. And so we see in the sort of upper toward the left of middle that we have a tab saying activity main. So that's what and that's the sort of selected tab. So that's what we're looking at. Over on the right, on a different set of tabs, we see that we have code split design. We are looking at design. And then we have under where it said activity main XML, the tab sort of left of middle, down below, right below that, we have a palette where we can grab various widgets. And then below that, we have the component tree. So either in the picture or in the component tree, we can then highlight our text view and have a look at it. A widget or a view highlighted. So this right now we have the text view highlighted. Then on the right we have a list of attributes, and there are many, so they are sort of categorized in different ways. And so at the top of this sort of long column are the declared attributes. So these are the ones that when we look at the code will be sort of explicitly mentioned in the XML when we look at the XML code. And so down below that you can see next the layout attributes, and that's what we're going to be another category that we're going to be looking at. So we're going to be looking at the constraint attributes, and so once we have them, then they will be declared, but we can also use this constraint widget to help us do that. And if we scroll way down to the bottom, then we can have a list of all the attributes listed alphabetically. So if you're sort of can't find sort of near the top some attribute you're looking for, you can get this very extensive list by going down to the all attributes. And any of these categories of attributes can be collapsed or expanded. So if it's sort of a greater than looking sign, arrow, then you can click on that and expand the list. And if it's sort of more of a down pointing arrow, then the list is expanded, and if you can click on that to sort of collapse the list. Here is on the constraint layout and the constraining. So we see here in this text view that was provided that says hello world, that it has 4 constraints at this stage. So we can see in the image the constraint by these sort of zigzag lines that are pointed to. And so this one has 4 constraints, top and bottom and left and right, or start and stop. And we can also see it in the declared attributes that these are all constrained to the parent, which is the container. And we can also see it in the constraint widget view, where we see that the dots, so the little square in the middle represents the view, and those dots are all solid, so there are constraints, and then there's sort of no padding right now, so it's constrained to all the sides of the parent container with sort of 0 padding all around. Back to the component tree in this picture in the lower left, that's under the palette, under the activity main drop or tab, then instead of highlighting the text view, if we highlight the constraint layout itself, we see that it is not constrained. So this is the outermost container, and so it's not going to, so things will be constrained to other things, to their container, or to other things within the same container, but that container itself will not be constrained. Fault provided hello world text view that we were given when we started this activity has constraints all around, and this leads to sort of a centering effect. So if I am constrained both at the top and at the bottom, then I'm going to be centered vertically. And if I'm constrained on left and right, then I'm going to be centered horizontally. Use that tab that was over on the right-hand side and choose to view it in code. Then here we see in XML the text view, and we can see the 4 layout attributes: app layout constraint bottom to bottom. So the bottom is constrained, the end is constrained, the start is constrained in the top. So the bottom and the top, the start is the left-hand side, the end is the right-hand side, and they are all right now constrained to the parent, to the container. What I've done now is I deleted that hello world text view. So in the component tree, I had it highlighted and I chose delete. And so that got rid of it. And then I went up to the palette and chose text, and I want to drag over a text view. So I want it to say something, but I want to have it say something other than hello world, and I want it to be somewhere other than sort of centered in the middle, horizontally and vertically. So I brought over this new text view, and when I bring over a new text view by dragging it from the palette, it is unconstrained. So and that's hinted at in this picture by those 4 blue open circles. So the open circles are sort of where you will do the constraining, but they are open, so they are at this stage unconstrained. And over on the right, I clicked the code to view it as XML code, and here's the text view, and it has no constraint attributes. And it's also, we have the red squiggly underline, and that is telling us that there's a problem. So if you don't constrain something, it doesn't quite know where to put it. Now it's going to put it in the upper left. And so if I only have one unconstrained thing, it'll figure it out. But if I have multiple unconstrained things, it's going to put them all sort of on the upper left, and they're all going to just be sort of on top of one another, and we're not going to be able to sort of see what's going on. So we need some constraints. To completely reproduce the hello world, because we are only going to constrain this text view 2 times, not 4 times. So you should have every view, everything that you add to the layout, you should constrain it at least once horizontally and once vertically. And so that's all we're going to do on this one: once vertically, once horizontally. So we are starting by constraining its top, and we are taking the visual approach. So we are in the design, taking that sort of blue bubble at the top, which was empty when we began. We sort of clicked on it and dragged up to the top of the container, to the parent. And so that created a vertical constraint, a constraint for the top. And then in the constraint widget, which you can see that's on the right-hand side, we've added so it's filled in solid, a little solid gray dot. So we see that it's constrained. And then also a drop-down list appears, and we can choose sort of an amount of padding so that we're not smack up against the edge of the container. And so it's like 24 in some unit. Process more or less, but horizontally. So we went to the what they're calling the start of the sort of left-hand side. And we are clicking on the empty little bubble and dragging over to the container side. And then it's being, the start is being constrained to the parent. And again, the little drop down appeared in the constraint widget and we added 24. So we see in the XML, in the code view, we see that we added a layout constraint start and a layout constraint top. And they are constrained, the constraint start is to the start of the parent, and the constraint top is to the top of the parent. So we're constraining this to the container because it's the first thing. Once we have this, we can constrain other things to it, but this has to be constrained to the parent. That's the only thing that exists so far. And we also see here the margin start and the margin top. That's 24 DP units. What we did over in the attributes is way at the top there was an ID attribute. So it was given a default ID, but I've renamed it TV name. I'm going to there's going to be a label for the user to enter a name, so I put in the word name, and then I put in a TV as a prefix corresponding to TextView. And when I change an ID, a pop-up comes up about that you renamed an ID and do you want to refactor? So yes, I said yes, I wanted to refactor by pressing the refactor button on that dialog that pops up. And then I'm also changing the actual text of the text view, getting it to say name. So I want it to be prompting the user to enter a name. The thing I want to do is to make a place for the user of the app, a place to enter a name. And so this time we want an edit text. So the text view was more of us displaying something for the user, but the edit text is for something for the user to more interact with. And you can control what's in an edit text, and this we're not going to put in much control, so we're just saying plain text, so we can sort of type almost anything in this box. So on the palette, I clicked on plain text and dragged it over onto the screen, the activity, and there is all the empty bubbles. So it is at this stage unconstrained. As the top goes, again, we should always constrain at least once horizontally and at least once vertically. So in terms of vertical, we constrained the top, and we're doing what we did before. We're dragging from that clicking on that top bubble and dragging up to the top of the container. So we are once again, in terms of the top, constraining it to the parent. But for the start, for the left-hand side, we are constraining it to the end of the thing that we just made. So we are dragging from a bubble on the left of the edit text, we are dragging that to a bubble on the right of the text view. And that is getting them to sort of sit next to one another. And again, once we make the constraints, then we can use the constraint widget if we want to add in a little bit more padding. So again, I made that 24. So there was a start constraint, and that was to TV name. TV name is the ID we gave to the text view. And the top was constrained to the parent, and they were both given margins of 24. Used what you see down on the lower right of the image I use that plus to sort of magnify it, and then you can see this constraint between the name. The first thing called name is the TextView TV name, and then the second thing is the edit text, and the start of the edit text is constrained to the end of the TV name, and that was with the 24 dp margin in there. Is in code view, and so you see that the edit text in XML down at the bottom, there is a layout constraint start to the end of, and its start is constrained to the end of, and then we see we're doing it the ID. We work by ID, and we're using the ID of the tag of the text view that has the ID of TV name. Added underneath the next text view to prompt the user for an email. But at this stage, I also noticed that my edit text for my name had this little red exclamation point next to it. And so I wanted to sort of ask, what's wrong? Why are you yelling at me? And so I could sort of click on the exclamation point, and then it said that the touch size. So again, this is for a phone, and somebody's going to use the phone mainly based on like a touch. And so then you want to make it big enough so that somebody with big clumsy fingers can access that, and they're saying that it's too small. So we didn't really specify a size, we just sort of dragged it out, and it had made it some match parent. So we see that the layout height was set to match parent, but that was not big enough. Whatever match parent was, it's not big enough for to be touched by all people. And it's telling you there in the error message, oh, make it at least 48. So that's what I did. I'm going to make it 48, and it will take that error message away. To the text view that is going to prompt the user to enter an email. And this is a text view, and I want it constrained, its start to be constrained to its container. So I dragged a bubble from its left-hand side over to the edge of the container, to the parent. And then the top I want constrained, I want it to be beneath what I have above. And so instead of constraining it to the container, to the parent, I'm constraining it to one of the items in the row above, and I'm constraining it to the one that takes up more space. So the edit text is taking up more space than the text view. So that therefore I am constraining the top of the email text view to the bottom of the edit text for the name. We are in the code view in the XML. So at the bottom, you see the text view I just added that says email, and it's one of its constraints, the layout underscore constraint top underscore to bottom of, and it's going to the edit text. So that is that vertical constraint for that guy. I'm adding the edit text for the email. One thing to note is that there are a number of variations of the edit text that will control what you can type into it. So there was one for email, so it's going to only allow the user to type in the symbols that would appear in an email or can appear in an email. And so that's the one that I chose to drag over. And then our purpose here is about constraining. And so we are constraining its start to the stop of the email text view, and we are constraining its top to the bottom of the edit text for the name. And it was, as you can see over in the attributes, it has an input type of the text email address. So that's going to specify, control what the user can type into it. This edit text came up with a different error message, and this one is that it's saying that there's no speakable text or nothing that can be read by a screen reader. So you want for a visually impaired person, for the edit text is some place where they are going to enter something. In this place, they're going to enter an email, and you want to somehow prompt them that, you know, when they are moving through your app and they reach this box, that it's an email that they should be entering. And so we need to deal with this problem. We could run with this problem, but we since we are noticing it, we would like to fix it. The way to fix this error is to specify that we have told the cited user that what they want in that box is email by putting the edit text next to the text view that says email. And the way we let the app know that that should also apply for the visually impaired is to make the text view for the email, make that the label for the edit text. So that was one of the attributes, LabelFor. I went down to the sort of full list of attributes, found the LabelFor, and in the dropdown, it said, okay, here are the options. What could it be a label for? The other things that are on the screen. One of them was the edit text. So I used the little drop down you see there to choose ET email, which was the ID that I gave to the email edit text.